Hey everyone, a new Liv is coming out soon with a new story, which will also start a new narrative arc. This video will cover Liv's full story up to that point, and I will make a second video about the new chapter after its release. I tried to mention every important event in which Liv was involved, but since she is part of Grey Raven, she appears in almost every main story chapter. To avoid a 5 hours long video, I decided to provide just a brief overview of most events, focusing on the ones in which she is more involved. A good portion of the video will be about surviving Lucem, her previous main story chapter, which is still one of the best stories in the entire game. I had to double check a lot of stuff, and it's still possible that I forgot something. Hopefully nothing too important. But anyway, let's get into it. When she was still a kid, Liv's mother was very sick, and after her death, Liv's father married another woman. Her siblings were older than Liv, and they often took advantage of her, but after the punishing outbreak, Liv volunteered to become a field medic. Considering the harsh conditions, Liv was supposed to prioritize speed and efficiency, focusing on the people that she could save, with wasting supplies on the ones that were beyond salvation. Nonetheless, Liv always tried to help everyone, and she even practiced various treatments on herself to reduce the amount of pain that she might cause to her patients, especially considering the lack of painkillers and anesthetics, which became almost a luxury. She trained under Officer Yelena, which had turned into a concert, but during a mission, Liv had disobeyed her order to retreat, deciding to stay behind to help a group of soldiers that had been overwhelmed by a horde of corrupted. She had saved many of them, but she was heavily injured, and in the end, Liv was turned into a construct. In Babylonia, Liv had eventually joined Ygritte, a task force team led by Vanessa, becoming Bambinata and Teasdale's teammate. However, Vanessa treated her constructs as simple tools, with no regards for their well-being, and she was willing to sacrifice them if deemed necessary to complete her mission. Because of this, Liv had eventually left Ygritte and chosen to join Lucia in the Grey Raven squad together with Liv. During one of their missions to reclaim a city from the corrupted, Lucia had been attacked by Alpha, which was attempting to push her into joining the Ascendants. However, upon realizing that she had no intention to betray Babylonia, Alpha had eventually left, sparing her life. Liv had patched her wounds, and after eliminating a corrupted machine that was affecting the behavior of other corrupted through some graffiti, Grey Raven received a new mission to eliminate the corrupted Tifa and retrieve more information about the Ascendants. After eliminating Tifa, they joined forces with Kamui and Nanami, eventually reaching an all-military base under the control of the Forsaken, a military faction led by Watanabe. Despite his enmity towards Babylonia, Watanabe initially worked with Grey Raven against the corrupted, but he took advantage of the situation to kidnap Liv. He needed their help to save some members of the Forsaken, whose consciousness had been trapped inside a consciousness container device. However, Liv herself ended up being trapped within it, and we eventually managed to rescue her after establishing a connection to her mind. Watanabe apologized for his actions, and since we had helped him rescue his companions, he decided to help us in tracking down the Ascendants. However, during the investigation, Liv detected that Kamui had been heavily infected by the punishing virus, and to avoid harming his companions, Kamui escaped on his own, hoping to find a solution before it was too late. Vera, and then even Bianca, had been sent to eliminate the infected Kamui, but Grey Raven intervened to protect him, convincing her to give him more time since he was showing signs of resistance to the infection. As they attempted to locate Kamui inside an abandoned facility, Karenina had also been rendered unconscious by the unknown energy source, and Liv had stabilized their condition through a connection between us, Lucia and Karenina's mind. Eventually, they located Kamui deeper into the facility, in the process of absorbing the Tenebrian energy that had affected Karenina, but he managed to resist its effects and use it to counter the punishing virus. While exploring another facility in the middle of the desert, Liv ended up separating from Grey Raven, but was eventually rescued by Bianca, which had been sent to investigate the area with a purifying force. The facility was producing a golden dust that was able to reduce the effectiveness of the punishing virus, but since it needed to be dispersed through central purification filters, it was impossible to utilize this technology on a larger scale. They also discovered that they were conducting experiments on both Babylonia and Forsaken constructs, infecting them with both the punishing virus and the golden dust, but eventually they destroyed the facility after it had been infected by Roland. After a crash landing in the Arctic Road Union, Grey Raven had eventually met Rosetta and helped the Forest Guard in defending New Murmansk against Alpha and a horde of corrupted coming from the ocean. When Babylonia's orbit lined up with the corrupted space station, Grey Raven had been sent there to investigate it, attempting to reclaim it. However, they discovered that its core was heavily corrupted and unstable, which eventually forced them to evacuate from the station before it collapsed, crashing down on Earth. The corrupted Romer formed in the space station had landed on Aslan, the massive train of the Akdilek Commercial Alliance, attaching to one of its wagons and mutating into a monster that was named Rail Heterozygote. Grey Raven had been sent to eliminate it, and despite the initial tension between the aristocrats of Dagdilek, they managed to destroy it with Bianca's help. Following their brief stay in Aslam, Grey Raven eventually boarded the Nidher, a massive ship originally from Kowloong. Asen wanted them to investigate the Nidher, and they eventually discovered that Villiers, its leader, was pretending to be his sister Chu. He had a degree of control over everyone in the Nidher through a collar around their necks, and he was looking for a suitable vessel for Washu, an advanced AI similar to Gestalt that he had developed himself. Using Lucy as a bait, while also assisted by Washu itself, Grey Raven eventually managed to kill Villiers, freeing the people of the Nidher before reaching the city of Kowloong. Following their arrival in Kowloong, the city was attacked by Luna and her Ascendants. She didn't want Babylonia to interfere, but many other Task Force teams were sent to reinforce Grey Raven and Strike Hawk in defending the city. Eventually, they forced the Ascendants to retreat, but Gabriel still managed to retrieve Washu from Chu. Following the Battle of Kowloong, Grey Raven, Strikehawk and Cerberus had another clash with the Ascendants at the Venus Splash Park, where they managed to retrieve documents about the Ascension network left behind by Shaum. When Luna attempted to make Babylonia crash from orbit by hacking into Gestalt through the stolen Washu, Grey Raven infiltrated Gestalt in order to stop her. They learned the coordinates of her current location in City 075, and they were sent there to investigate. Upon reaching City 075, they discovered the Red Tide, a mutated form of concentrated punishing virus, and during their investigation of Luna's underground base, they learned about Gabriel's experiments. They realized that Gabriel had betrayed Luna, and after collaborating with the other Ascendants, Grey Raven eventually managed to save her from the Polyphage, a massive Hetero creature that had attempted to absorb her powers. Following the incident of City-075, the Red Tide had kept spreading through the underground waterways, and Grey Raven had been deployed to stop it, positioning domain nodes to guide the Longinus Arsenal targeting system. During another mission, Grey Raven and other Task Force teams led by Hans had been sent to retrieve a sample from the Hetero Hive Mother, located in an abandoned Celtra purification filter in the Puglia Forest Park. This Hetero Hive Mother had been nurtured by Vonnegut and Cinderelic, which allowed it to develop animal instincts like fear thanks to Roland, which had led humans in the area in order to expedite the process. During the confrontation with Grey Raven, the Hetero Hive Mother had given birth to a pair of twins, extremely evolved Hetero creatures in comparison to anything that they had seen before. They were faster and stronger than anything that they encountered so far, and Grey Raven barely managed to escape after retrieving a sample from the Hetero Hive Mother. Nonetheless, heavily infected during the brief confrontation, the Grey Raven Commandant fell in a coma, and while everyone evacuated from the area, Hansa stayed behind to activate the domain nodes for the Longinus Arsenal. The explosion dispersed highly concentrated punishing virus in the surrounding area, forcing the ground forces to find refuge in nearby conservation areas, while newly evolved flying Hetero creatures dominated the skies, preventing Babylonia to send support forces on the surface. Stranded on the surface, Babylonia ground forces attempted to protect many conservation areas, swarmed by hordes of Hetero creatures often led by the Hetero twins. Liv took care of many wounded refugees in the conservation area of City 043, making sure to learn each of their names and preferences, sedating their disputes, and often singing to brighten their mood despite the harsh conditions and lack of supplies. As a doctor that fought in the front lines, she was supposed to prioritize efficiency, without growing overly attached to her patients, but she had always cared about all of them, even if that brought more suffering whenever she was unable to save them. Still in a coma, the Grey Raven Commandant was also one of her patients. Despite all her efforts, our situation had not improved in over a month. We needed to be relocated to the start of life in Babylonia, but the flying Hetero creatures were preventing Babylonia transports to land safely on the surface. As the twins were about to approach their current location, Grey Raven needed to relocate the refugees, but since many of them were wounded and their vehicles were limited, they had to do multiple journeys, leaving behind some of the refugees while they escorted the others. During one of these evacuations, Vanessa decided to delay the Hetero creatures that had been following the convoy, staying behind together with Bambinata. Being a former member of Ygritte, Liv had been surprised by Vanessa's decision, since in the past she never hesitated in sacrificing others to achieve her goals. However, upon her return to the conservation area, Liv found that the people that had stayed behind had passed away. An old couple that had decided to give priority to younger people. Stanley, a kid that had stayed behind with his dog, but that had ultimately decided to kill himself, driven into despair by the hopeless situation. And no longer after that, even Fentine, a pregnant woman that had left the conservation area looking for supplies. Guided by matches, Stanley's dog, Liv found her not too far away, bleeding profusely after giving birth. It was too late to save her, but she has lived to bring her baby to Babylonia. Liv had been devastated by those losses, but she continued to perform her duties, tending the other refugees with the resolve to save as many lives as possible. Grey Raven had also begun testing the newly developed Omega prototype against the twins. These weapons were able to cause them serious damage, limiting their regenerative abilities by absorbing the punishing virus in its vicinity, but it was hard to utilize them effectively. In comparison to other Hetero creatures, the twins learned quickly, and upon realizing the danger posed by the Omega prototypes, it became increasingly harder to bait them within their range. Babylonia had discovered that Chronos had captured Luna, and that they had been using Ascendant data to develop a new specialized frame. Considering the desperate situation, Hassan wanted to work with Chronos, sharing the data of the Omega file retrieved from Atlantis in order to develop a new frame that could utilize it. This prototype requires someone with a strong, stable mind. Considering that Lucia's mind was still adjusting to the recently acquired Alpha's data, two of the best candidates were Lee and Liv. Such a frame will be able to attract a punishing virus similarly to an Ascendant, going through the person's mind before being absorbed by the Omega weapon. This process was extremely dangerous and the probability of survival were extremely low, but Liv volunteered to test this prototype nonetheless, becoming a carrier for an Omega weapon. Following Hassan's instructions, Liv reached an abandoned underground base in City 047 and took one of the transport crafts to return to Babylonia, bringing with her Cosette, Fantin's daughter, and the Grey Raven Commandant, still unconscious since their escape from the Puglia Forest Park. Upon returning to Babylonia, Liv commenced the adaptation tests for her new frame. Professor Hippocrates, one of Liv's old teachers in medical school, assisted her in the process, doing her best to reduce the damage that it could cause to Liv's mind. Knowing about the danger that it posed, she still asked Liv to not use that frame, but Liv was determined to help humanity and the people still stranded on the surface, even if that meant sacrificing herself. Also, thinking about all the people that she had been unable to save, she had asked Asimov to include wings in the design of her new frame. While other Task Force teams kept fighting against the twins and their Hetero creatures on the surface, Liv continued their adaptation tests in Babylonia. Asimov had previously fixed Chrome's issue in his specialized frame by adding an inhibitor that would prevent his corruption from going over a certain threshold. However, in Liv's case, the entire purpose of this frame was to go over this threshold, attracting a more punishing virus so that it could be absorbed by the Omega weapon. Considering the functionality of the frame, Liv herself risked turning into an Ascendant as she gathered the punishing virus. Because of this, her frame had been equipped with a mind and needle probe to keep track of her infection levels and an EMP collar provided by the Purifying Force in order to disable her in case she lost control. And if that happened, Bianca herself had been tasked with Liv's elimination. During the adaptation test, Liv felt like her mind was being torn apart, and even if Professor Hippocrates had made her migraines less frequent, the intensity had not diminished. On the surface, Lee, Lucy, and Chrome attempted to delay the twins as they attacked Aslam using the enhanced Omega weapons, but despite Shrek's sacrifice, they were eventually forced to find refuge inside an abandoned church, which was now fully surrounded by hordes of Hetero creatures. After almost a month of adaptation tests, Liv eventually switched to the Empyrea frame. According to the simulations, she will have an operational limit of 3 hours before the frame was fully corrupted. Before departing, Liv visited the unconscious Commandant one last time, and as she boarded the transport craft, she was approached by many, as if they were not expecting her to come back alive. Once her transport was about to reach the surface, Liv descended from the skies with her own frame. Hetero creatures turned into red mist, dissolved by her Omega weapon. Infected conscious regained their senses as she absorbed their infection, corrupting her own mind. For hours, Liv destroyed hordes of corrupted and Hetero creatures that had been surrounding the church, saving her companions. Even the twins had been severely damaged, but each Hetero creature that she destroyed, each constant that she freed from infection, caused her agonizing pain, shuddering her mind as she was overwhelmed by the information contained within the punishing virus. She started to experience memories of people that had been previously consumed by the punishing virus. Their lives and struggles, together with their last moments as they succumbed to the virus or were consumed by the red tide. She saw memories of Kowloong, a woman that had assisted their mother when Liv was still a child. Memories of Yelena, the instructor that had trained her when she had joined the military as a field medic. 2 of the countless people that had been killed by the punishing virus, whose memories were now overwhelming her own, shuddering her mind and destroying her sense of self. Not even the Omega weapon was able to keep up with such levels of corruption. Heavily infected, Liv even established a connection to the Ascension network. She saw visions of the simulated future predicted by the network. Humanity ultimately wiped out by the punishing virus, and the entire planet devastated by an eternal winter, as every living being had been consumed by the red tide. In the meantime, in Babylonia, Nanami had also been in the process of experiencing simulated futures through Gestalt. Similarly to the predicted future simulated by the Ascension network, humanity's survival was almost impossible. Not only because of the punishing virus, but also the inevitable clash between them and the machines. Nanami had always wished for humans to coexist with machines, and even if she didn't know how to achieve that future, she realized that there were a few important steps that she needed to take in order to make significant changes. She needed to take a role as the sage of the Church of Machina, leading the machines. But first, she needed to prevent Liv's death, awakening the Grey Raven Commandant from their coma ahead of time. And for that, she needed Ishmael's assistance. Having a strong, stable mind beacon, the Grey Raven Commandant had been able to withstand a connection to Luna, an agent of the Ascension network, resisting the heavy infection, and would also help both Lucy and Chrome stabilize their mind when they switched to their specialized frame. However, this time around, Liv was on her own. Following Nanami's request, Ishmael awakened the Grey Raven Commandant ahead of time. We had been in a coma for almost 3 months, and upon learning about the current situation and Liv's ultimate sacrifice, we attempted to reach her on the surface. Still in our transport craft, we tried to establish a remote connection to her, but despite her initial surprise and relief that we were finally awake, she refused to establish a connection, knowing that in her corrupted state it would be too dangerous for us. Unable to force our way through, we contacted Lucia, which had been trying to do the same, attempting to connect to Liv in her confused state. Being closer to her, Lucia managed to reach Liv, and with her help, we hacked into Liv's mind, which was overloaded by corrupted memories. We eventually managed to establish a deep mind connection, reaching Liv's consciousness before it could fade away in the sea of corrupted data. Trusting us, Bianca had given us the key to Liv's EMP collar, but before disarming it, we needed to know Liv's decision. In her current state, even if she survived, she would have to endure a life of suffering, with constant migraines and the burden of all the memories that had affected her mind. Before leaving Babylonia, Hippocrates had told us about what Liv had to endure using the Empyrea frame, and in her condition, it would have been a mercy to just let her die. But it was not our decision to make. Just like everyone else had done before her, Liv wanted to keep fighting. She had not regretted her decision to use the Empyrea frame, and despite her willingness to sacrifice herself, she wasn't ready to give up, even if that meant having to endure more pain. We promised her that we would do anything in our power to help her out, and as we removed her collar, she fell unconscious in our arms. Upon returning to Babylonia, Liv was transferred back to her Eclipse frame. Her mind was still heavily damaged, and the Grey Raven Commandant had to perform multiple dives into her mind in order to restore her consciousness. We almost lost ourselves in the sea of memories and corrupted data, which were almost indistinguishable from reality if it weren't for interferences caused by Asimov and Professor Hippocrates, which were monitoring the entire process from outside. Liv had lost her own sense of self, and through the Spear of FOS, we eventually managed to restore multiple shards of her shattered mind. We guided her through a series of her own memories, helping her realize that they belonged to her, that the person she was observing was herself, and that their companions were waiting for her. Eventually, Liv woke up in her old Eclipse frame, but since then she had to go through constant therapy sessions, aided by us and Professor Hippocrates. Her migraines never fully disappeared, but eventually they began to subside. Despite not being allowed to perform missions, Liv still requested to be deployed together with the available task force teams during the Copperfield Aquarium campaign, reinforcing the ground forces that had been defending the shoreline against the Hetero creatures that had emerged from the ocean. Months later, Liv, Lucy and the Grey Raven Commandant had been sent on the surface to investigate the origin of powerful earthquakes that had devastated some conservation areas, destroying necessary infrastructure. The earthquakes had been preliminary steps caused by the imminent descent of the Hetero Tower. Upon its arrival, strong electromagnetic waves spread all over the planet, reaching even Babylonia, infecting many humans with a devastating sense of dread or inciting extreme violence. On the surface, the levels of punishing virus rose drastically in a wide area around the tower, and being in its vicinity, the Grey Raven Commandant Mind Beacon was immediately overloaded, sending both Liv and Lucy to the ground since they were also connected to it. Eventually, we managed to regain control, offering to connect even more constructs to our mind beacon since other commandants were succumbing to the effects of these strong electromagnetic waves. While Grey Raven and other task force squads handled the other creatures around the tower, Lee had forcefully switched to his hyper-real frame. Being immune to the punishing virus, he was the only one that could enter the Hetero tower, and in the end, through countless adjustments across multiple timelines, he had managed to revert the function of the tower, turning into a massive Omega weapon that was able to absorb the punishing virus in its vicinity. When Lucy had been affected by the interference caused by the Ascension network, Liv and Lee had been sent to help the Grey Raven Commandant, while Lucy attempted to find a solution to this issue together with Alpha at Fort Winter. Following the events of Fort Winter, Lucy had to stay in Babylonia to make sure that there were no other issues with her mind, especially after working with an Ascendant. While performing a regular mission in City 027 with Liv and Lee, the Grey Raven Commandant had noticed that the Hetero creatures were behaving differently, working together to achieve their goals instead of acting like mindless beasts. In a nearby conservation area, Cerberus had noticed a similar behavior, and Grey Raven had been sent to help them out, protecting the town, while Vera number 21 attempted to escape from the growing Hetero forest, which had started to manifest around the clean zone created by the Inver-Hetero tower. Upon their return, Liv had helped the severely injured Vera, tending her wounds before they could bring her back to Babylonia. While the Grey Raven Commandant and Lee were assisting Echo, a test subject that had managed to escape from Utopia, Liv had been helping with the reconstruction of Constellia. However, after confirming that Chronos was the lead researcher of Utopia, the full Grey Raven squad had been deployed to assault the Flying Fortress, eliminating most of the Aurora squadron while Echo dealt with her father. After helping Echo in Utopia, the Grey Raven Commandant transport craft had been sabotaged, and after crashing into a river of red tide, we had been captured by Lidus, which used a consciousness transfer device to implant our memories inside some of our clones, made by Chronos using the data they had collected from us during our imprisonment, following our interaction with Luna in City 075. For 2 weeks, Grey Raven had attempted to find us, helped by Strikehawk. They discovered a secret room inside an abandoned hospital, where they found one of our clones. It had no memories, and it died not long after being rescued, but in the same room, they found the consciousness transfer device and learned about Lidus' involvement. Eventually, the real Grey Raven Commandant had escaped from another of Lidus' bases, returning to Babylonia, but almost a year after that incident, Lamia told us that one of her clones that had all our memories had been used by Lidus and Vonnegut to perform experiments on Project Tilla, eventually giving birth to a Hetero creature created with her consciousness that he named Chaos. When Kowloong had been attacked by Schultz and Cradle's Hetero creatures, Grey Raven and other task force teams had been sent to defend the city. Liv had treated many of the wounded civilians and attempted to help Ying after she had been stabbed by Schultz. Eventually, they forced Cradle's Hetero creatures to retreat, while Chu and the Grey Raven Commandant removed Schultz from the Tabula Akasha. Following the battle in Kowloong, Liv, Lucy and the Grey Raven Commandant had been sent to monitor the growth of the Hetero zone, since it had started to grow rapidly around the clean zone. During the mission, they also attempted to escort many wounded refugees to a nearby conservation area, but eventually, the Grey Raven Commandant had been summoned back to Babylonia in order to assist Teddy and Asimov, since they were attempting to gain access to the sealed section of Gestalt. As they continued to help the refugees, Liv and Lucia eventually found documents related to the heralds of the Norman Mining Corps, which had attempted to retrieve information about Dominic, disappeared after shutting down Reactor 1, the zero-point reactor that had caused the punishing outbreak, which was nearby their current location. As they were about to reach the edge of the Hetero zone, Lucy had been heavily injured by Hetero creatures, and after losing contact with them, the Grey Raven Commandant, Liv and Teddy arrived to provide support, eventually forcing Cradle to retreat, slowing down the expansion of the Red Tide. When Agent Zero escaped from the sealed section of Gestalt, Grey Raven had attempted to prevent it from leaving Babylonia. However, Agent Zero infected a portion of the spaceman, detaching it from the rest of Babylonia, and crashed it down on her, disappearing within the Hetero tower. This caused a sudden increase in the concentration of punishing virus within the clean zone, and Grey Raven had been sent on the surface to investigate. They learned from Luna that it was caused by Selene and Agent Zero, which were attempting to merge with the Ascension network within the Hetero tower. Luna was the only one that could follow them inside the tower, but she needed to restore her powers, and Grey Raven helped her make a deal with Cradle. The Grey Raven Commandant established a connection to her, making sure she wouldn't lose herself while she merged with the Red Tide, while the rest of Grey Raven and her Ascendant protected her as soon as Cradle attempted to betray her. In the end, Luna reclaimed their full authority as an agent of the Ascension network, eliminating Selene and stopping the rapid increase of the punishing virus levels within the clean zone. During a routine surface scan, Babylonia had detected an abnormal energy source from an unknown area in the Arctic Route Union. Upon learning that it was Tsiolkovsky Aerospace City, a highly technological city that isolated itself after the punishing outbreak, Liv and the Grey Raven Commandant have been sent there to investigate. Upon reaching the city, they discovered that Veronica, an awakened mechanoid, had taken over the city, and misled by Alexei, a human that was being controlled by Schultz, she was attempting to threaten Babylonia by charging up the Bifrost, a magnetic accelerator truck originally designed to send spacecrafts into orbit, but that could also be used as a weapon to strike Babylonia directly. Liv had helped many of the wounded refugees in the city, and eventually, Anying had dealt with Veronica, exposing Schultz's manipulation and convincing her to return the city to the humans. Following our interference within the Hetero Tower, aided by both Ishmael and Nanami, we restored a timeline in which the Hetero Tower never descended, reducing the impact of Vonnegut's actions by cutting his connection to his future self, and weakening Cradle since she never merged with Agent Zero that came with the tower. Liv and Lucia were never sent to investigate the earthquakes that preceded the Hetero Tower descent. Cradle's expansion of the Red Tide was drastically reduced, and they never confronted her at the site of Reactor 1. Grey Raven didn't help Luna against Cradle, but they helped her against Selene, since this time around she had more authority over the Hetero creatures. And then, growing desperate to restore his connection with his future self, Vonnegut had attempted to reactivate Reactor 1, forcing the Hetero Tower descent, but they've been stopped and seemingly killed by the full Grey Raven squad. That's it for Liv's story so far. From what we have seen from her preview, it seems like Liv will be testing a new technology in her next chapter, just like she did in Surviving Lucem, but surely nothing bad will happen to her this time around. I expect that her lingering issues caused by the Empyrea frame will be a big part of the story, but I hope that this new story arc around the Phyllo Nexus will be an opportunity to develop the other factions, since it seems somewhat connected to all of them, like a new collaborative research to develop human technology even further. The patch is coming out soon, and I'll try to cover the chapter as soon as possible. As usual, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.